Today I'm with Sean Nguyen, who owns Papa Wagyu, and we're going to share his story of how he went from tech recruiter at, well, I guess then it was Facebook, now it's Meta, to then being profitable enough to quit his tech job in 6 months and have delicious product that we get to eat today, which is Wagyu.
I think I was selling it close to maybe about 6 months into it, and I was like, oh shit, I'm making 10 to 15 grand profit. The biggest cost to any business, as you know, is customer acquisition, right? And where I found success there is, how do you like your steaks?
Maybe medium rare is fine, but as chef recommends is how I like my steak today. And if you haven't had Wagyu yet, you need to try it. And his story is all coming up next. So I have never done a podcast with food, surprisingly. It's always with a beverage, but never with food. And I have the king of Wagyu steaks, Papa Wagyu, Sean Nguyen. Sean, thanks for joining me on the show, man.
Thanks for having me, man. This is amazing. I mean, you get to hang out with your friends. You have some food and some wine. What a better way to spend a day, huh? Check this out, though.
Okay. So what is this?
It's Australian Wagyu picanha. So picanha, if you've never had it, have you been to a Brazilian steakhouse?
I have, yeah.
Yeah. So they give you like that top sirloin cap, right?
Yeah.
So picanha is like the Brazilian way to say it, but there's like different names. What's beautiful about this cut is there's a lot of marbling in here, but the beauty is this fat cap right here.
Okay.
So we heavily salt it, and as you cook it down, it's going to naturally baste that steak. And then there's also a lot of like beefy flavor. So in my viewpoint, I think this is the best in terms of texture and flavor. And it's a really fun cut to share with friends and family. So very celebratory.
Well, I appreciate you sharing it with me and the viewers today. I mean, just like the quick resume, right? You went from working in tech to now having a couple of different entrepreneurship adventures here with Papa Wagyu and some other companies that you're helping out with. Run me like on the quick backstory is how did you get to now grilling up steaks on a rooftop, having some fun?
Yeah. So I'm sure you know Gary Vaynerchuk, right?
Yeah.
My story is very similar to his. After college, I graduated, went to work for my family's furniture store, took that over, did that for about 8 years. And I was actually quite unhappy with my life. So then I turned 30 and I was like, what do I want to do with my life, right? So I was like, I love helping people. So I finally made the move. I went to Facebook, started recruiting Android engineers, joined in 2019, and then did that for about a year and a half. And then my bosses are looking. I was actually building out some other business on the side, right? The reality is I do kind of work at the pace of like 2 to 3 people. So that job was relatively easy. So the extra time, I'm like, I just want to build something. So that's actually about the time the pandemic happened. So I remember sitting at Facebook and my coworker's like, hey, Sean, I think we're going to shut down. I was like, what are you talking about? Right. And I started laughing at her. Next week we're at home. So I was like, damn, I love talking to people, but I'm stuck at home. What do I do? Yeah. So I started this Instagram page called Papa Wagyu, name that my wife gave me. And I was just really excited about being a dad and just cooking up steaks and Wagyu, right? So I have a friend that he is basically kind of the king of the industry, largest distributor in the area. So we would have these parties at my mom's house, and he would have this huge 15-pound A5 Wagyu loin. There's like 40 of us. We only eat half of it. And he's like, Sean, you want to take the rest? And I was like, yeah, sure, why not? So I was like, I don't know what to do with this, right? So I started actually cooking in my backyard and hanging out with just friends and family, just like this. Started posting on Instagram, and then it just kind of got popular. And then I was like, man, this would be kind of cool to do this job. Always been a passion and a dream to be in the food industry. I didn't think it would actually happen. And then kind of along that way, I've met a lot of other entrepreneurs and started actually consulting for some other really big brands. And then here I am today.
Okay, so break it down. Like, what was the first sale? So he was giving you extra cuts. Was that to sell, or was that just to host parties and kind of use it as like a PR marketing trade where a lot of brands will do that?
He's actually a really successful guy, so he just wanted me to eat it. Nothing, no strings attached. And then actually that happened multiple times.
Okay.
This is really,
And then when did you say, well, hey, I think I could sell this? Like, like what was that point?
It was basically, I would post these like videos of me cooking and just teaching people how to cook. And then people are like, hey, where do I buy that at? And then it happened so much, I was like, shit, I should be that guy, right? So then actually I started buying it from my friend, and that's how I got started. And then, I think I actually left Facebook in February 2021.
How long was it from, obviously you were building this on the side.
Yeah.
From it being, hey, I'm starting this on the side to I've replaced my tech income. How long did that take? Or for at least you to be comfortable making that jump?
I think I was selling it close to maybe about 6 months into it. And I was like, oh shit, I'm making 10 to 15 grand profit as a side gig, right? And I was like, that's pretty lucrative. I wonder what happens if I actually do this full time. So I'd say about the 6 month mark.
And it was just you all by yourself, no employees?
All by myself, yeah. So I basically bootstrapped it. I did everything down to web design on Shopify, logistics, everything, yeah. And actually at the time when I left, what really made me do the jump was, okay, I have enough like income from Papa Wagyu, but I think the secret is actually to build something that scales. So I was trying to build something like CrowdCow. I don't know if you've heard of them. So I had 2 other partners, Amazon backgrounds, very, very successful. And then, we started building that out. And then, you smell that?
I smell it already.
So what's going to happen here is we're going to start this at a very low heat. And the fat's going to drip down, create smoke when it's flavor. So it's going to take a while to cook, but very excited.
Doing this grill. Okay, one. Cheers.
Cheers. Thanks.
Well, congrats, man.
Yeah. What are we drinking today?
This is a 2013 Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon from Raymond Vineyards. So,
wow.
Yeah, it's 11 years old bottle.
Wow.
Think about it. It's kind of fun.
That's very special, yeah.
Wine, I always like wine because wine is like a time capsule. And I guess there's dry age, but I don't think you have 11-year-old dry age stuff because that gets a little crazy.
Yeah. All like Wagyu is essentially wet aged, right? Especially if it's coming from overseas, it's in the cryovac. So, by the time you get it, it's probably anywhere from 30 to 60 days, right? But dry aged beef, is delicious.
And then just break it down for me on an education standpoint because there's different grades of meat.
Yes.
Where on like the American grading scale to now there's different Wagyu scales too. Like how does this compare to what most people in America would?
That's a great question. So I think in America, there's a huge disconnect on like where your food comes from. And then there's also like a lot of misinformation. Long story short, most of the Wagyu that you actually eat in the U.S. U.S. and Australia is going to be a hybrid between like a Japanese Wagyu cattle and Angus. They call that an F1. It's like 50-50. Where that is for marbling, most Wagyu in the U.S. isn't that great, to be honest.
Okay.
And the reason, like, there's a lot of science behind it. And, the Japanese, have you heard of A5 Wagyu?
Mm-hmm.
So A5 is a grade, right? And within Japanese Wagyu, it's actually the highest grade. So it's highest amount of marbling and also highest yield. And if you've had A5 Wagyu, basically, it's like beef butter. It just melts in your mouth, right? So Wagyu translates to Japanese cow. And there's basically 4 species. Most of the Wagyu that we eat is from the Japanese black. And then if you look at the genetics, in Japan, the Wagyu is a 100% Wagyu, right? There's no crossbreeding. It's actually illegal. So if you call something Wagyu, it actually has to be 100%. Similar to if you have like a cab, right? It's like 100% Cabernet, right? And there's no mixture.
Wait, and then just out of curiosity, because restaurants won't specify sometimes like the source of the wine, right?
Yeah.
Like it could be California red wine, it could be Napa Valley, it could be like a vineyard designate, which is why you get more expensive. In the U.S. at least, that's not really regulated.
Yeah.
Like if they just put Wagyu, they don't necessarily have to say if it's Japanese Wagyu. It could be a breed.
Yeah.
So only if it says like A5 Japanese Wagyu can you actually believe it then?
Yeah. So basically, when you're looking into Wagyu, you basically want to ask like, okay, what type is this? And literally, it's genetics, right? So F1 is a 50-50 split. There's F2, F3, and then F4. The higher the number, the more Wagyu genetics. And the reason that's important is because Wagyu actually has the lowest melting point. So Japanese Wagyu melts around 78 degrees. So if you actually took your finger and you rubbed it across, it actually melts. And why that's important is because if you're eating that, right, you should kind of know what you're eating. And then my whole thing is like, I want you to understand. And then if you like something, tell you why you like it, right?
Yeah.
Is Japanese Wagyu better than American Wagyu? In terms of marbling, yes, but everyone has different preferences. For me, actually, I like the hybrid. It's a little bit leaner. Japanese Wagyu is really good if you do over like a nigiri.
Yeah.
Kind of breaks it up a little bit. But to go back to this, the reason why this is special is there's something called purebred Wagyu. And if you look at the genetics, it's like 93.75% or higher of Wagyu genetics, a little bit leaner of a texture.
Okay.
So this is very special. You actually don't find this in the US very often. But I would imagine over the next few years, people will kind of get educated about it, and then you'll have access to it.
I can smell it. It's delicious. You've given me a few samples, and now I've been able to taste a few things, and it is interesting to see the difference. I always thought that, man, like I could eat a whole A5, and I remember I bought one for my sister's birthday, and yeah, I couldn't eat the whole thing.
Yeah.
It could only be part of it. It wasn't the whole thing. It was too much. So
in addition to like what this Wagyu is, what I try to do is tell people like how to eat it.
Yeah.
Average portion of like A5 Wagyu is like 3 to 4 ounces. It's delicacy, very rich. You really don't want to eat more than that. Actually, if you eat over like a pound of it, you probably get sick. And I learned this the hard way. Yeah.
Okay, so I want to know, how do you go from working in tech to actually being able to confidently like leave your job in 6 months? Like, what were the steps that you took? How did you scale it to the point to where like you can count on it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I'm gonna get a little philosophical here for you. So before the pandemic, right, I had a mindset where I'm gonna live forever. Pandemic happened, and I'm like, oh, maybe not, right? Like, we don't know. So that kind of switched my mind to be like, if I actually want to do something, I should do it. And then if I do and I fail, I can always go back to what I was doing, right? But the actual strategic steps was I basically needed to have a certain amount of income and reserves to make sure that I'm gonna be okay. I also have my wife too that works in tech, and that's also a little safety net. But yeah, I think the pandemic was actually a really good time for the industry because everyone's staying at home, right? So the steps is like, it really depends. Like for me, I like bootstrapping things. I like learning. And then that allowed me to kind of do everything. What it takes is when I was working at Facebook, Papa Wagyu, my other startup, I was working close to 80 to 100 hours a week consistently, right? And I think that's just what it takes, right? You talk to a lot of entrepreneurs out there. You have to work those crazy hours, right? Especially in the beginning. And if there's one thing I would say you need is you need grit.
Yeah.
You know, because it's gonna be really hard, but you know, if you really love it, then you just figure out a way to make it happen. But the strategy behind there was basically, okay, you know, you train martial arts, right? So I'm like, who are the black belts that I could learn under, you know, and then let me go talk to them, build relationships, and then, you know, they can help me, right? So even though I do a lot of things by myself, is actually I do have a lot of mentors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you got the distribution contract from your supplier, right?
Yep.
You started a website. I'm guessing was the next step. Was the first, like, run me through the first sale. Was it all just in person? Like, we were in farmers markets? Was it like friends and family just coming to the house? Like, what was it?
It was actually all directly through Instagram, DM, which is strange, right? So I think what happened was, you know, I had a first handful of customers. It actually came from my friends and family. So they were kind of my biggest supporters. They bought, and then their friends would be like, hey, where'd you get that from? So one of my things I obsess about is how to deliver exceptional customer experience and delight, right? Warren Buffett talks about this a lot. It's like, you should spend your time thinking about how to not just make your customer happy, but delight, right?
Yeah.
So I spent a lot of time thinking about that. And then with me, when you buy from me, you actually get me, right? So I'll tell you if you want to deep dive into the genetics or whatnot. But it's basically, you know, like wine, for example. I think people can be kind of discouraged, right? But if you have like a trusted source, so for me, I'll teach you about Wagyu. I'll teach you how to cook it, right? And then give you kind of personal recommendations.
So you're a lot more hands-on early stages.
Yeah.
And then I mean, to then profit $10,000, $15,000 a month, you have to be doing a decent amount of volume. They can't just be friends and family unless you're eating a lot of meat.
Yeah.
So how did it scale to that point then? Like what was the next steps? Was it did you have like an influencer that you knew or like a celebrity chef that like helped scale the business? Like what was it?
I started doing giveaways on jackfruit. You've heard of the page?
But
So jackfruit has a really big Asian American community.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, I don't have a marketing background, right? I actually didn't do any marketing in my last business. It was all word of mouth. So I was like, okay, what is like the customer base I want to target? Actually, it's going to be actually around me because shipping is really expensive. So jackfruit actually has a huge following. I started doing giveaways of Wagyu, and that's also my way to just give back and then do something fun. And then that gained a lot of traction. And then I think they had like maybe 200,000 followers at the end.
Wow. So you would say, hey, we're gonna post the giveaway on this website. You have to make sure that you follow us on Instagram to be entered. And then you kind of just did that grassroots,
yeah. And I think people are like, dang, where'd you get like Wagyu, right? Like, I want to get it. And before, around that time, I would say the market wasn't as saturated. If you want to get Wagyu, then you would go to like an Alexander Steakhouse or whatever, right? And it's going to cost you $150, $200 for 3 to 4 ounces, right? And then it's relatively inaccessible to a lot of people. So for me, I wanted to make it accessible. I want to make it fun. And then I think it just kind of took off from there. And then along the way, I met, friends in the industry, started doing consulting. And then now I actually use a company called Maruhide. So I do consulting for them, redesign the brand, a bunch of other things, but they actually drop ship for me. So it's something I kind of worked out with them. Yeah.
So you started locally, moved into drop shipping. You mentioned that you had another business before that. How many businesses have you had before this one?
2. So we had the furniture store, right? So that was a 40,000 square foot store. I was 3rd generation owner, right? And then the other big business was called Wagyu Society.
Okay.
So those 2. And then
what is Wagyu Society versus Papa Wagyu?
Just think of it. The easiest way is Papa Wagyu is so the wine industry, right? If you go to Napa, Pritchard Hills, small scale, highest quality, that's what Papa Wagyu is, right? You get me. Wagyu Society was going to be the scaled version of that. It's kind of like a crowd cow, right?
Okay.
And this is 2 opposite ends of the spectrum.
Why did that one not work out?
When I think of things, I actually point everything back to myself, right? Everything is my fault. So my 2 partners, Wagyu looked very promising to them. We built that up. But at the very end, it wasn't actually lucrative enough. You got to understand their businesses. They're selling containers of products. Page 1 of Amazon is relatively easy, right? So, for them, if they launch a product, they can make 200 to 300K in sales one day.
Yeah.
So for us to scale Wagyu Society, we require like a tremendous amount of work and time.
Yeah.
So that's where they were like, okay, maybe this doesn't work out. And then also my son was born around that time. So I was like, okay, let me just focus onto one thing. It actually took kind of a little break there. Because my parents, they were entrepreneurs. They were working crazy hours. Never saw them, like maybe an hour or 2 for dinner. So I was like, okay, when my son is born, I want to be there for him. So that was good. Which actually probably worked out in my favor because I met all these other entrepreneurs that are actually parents. And then that allows me to kind of build that layer of trust with them. And
I think what's very interesting about Wagyu, that's kind of similar to wine and like in the real estate space, these are all luxury industries. And the people that you meet end up being really impressive sometimes, right? Like now that you've been in the food industry for a little bit, what are some like the fun stories or like crazy people that you've met along the way and like any interesting advice that you've gotten from them?
I can tell you a crazy story. So I started selling Wagyu, right? And then I got a connection through my cousin's girlfriend. So I went to go deliver this. I'm talking to 3 guys and, we're hitting it off, right? I get along with a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like talking about, where you've eaten around the world. This guy has like really good food knowledge. And I'm like, he's eating at places where David Beckham is, right? And I was like, this guy fucking must be somebody, right?
Yeah.
But I was like, I didn't want to pry too much into it. As I'm leaving, I'm like, hey, we should exchange information, right? Which normally people are like, yeah, let's connect, right? This guy was weird because I would get the other 2 information. The guy would just be like, back off. I'm like, that's weird, right? So then, I actually leave that. And then I don't know who he is, but he took my Instagram down. So I get home and I'm like, someone tags me, right? And it says at Lincoln Park.
Okay.
I'm like, that's weird.
Park.
Like maybe
like the rock band?
Yeah, maybe you like, maybe like music or something. So like I go back to eating, right? And I'm like, that's curious. I'm curious. He has a lot of followers. So I look back and was like, oh shit, it's actually one of the members from them, right? So the interesting thing is through this, I've actually met a lot of people, right? Story wise, so I used to go to this celebrity golf tournament, and it's basically they're raising money for different charities, right? For this one is specifically is for at-risk youth or underprivileged children. So there's a guy, Bill Hammond. There was like a lot of events and concerts for Hollywood. He's a very successful guy, but he'll pull in different celebrities to throw these golf tournaments. So it's for Cedric the Entertainer. So I was cooking, and then everyone's like, "Oh shoot, that's Dr. J," and I was like, "Oh, that's cool. We got a doctor here, right? Is he like a world-class surgeon or something?" Right? And for me, if you know me, like I don't really fall into pop culture or whatever. And then I'm like, "Oh, this guy's like pretty tall for a physician." For a physician, I was like, "This guy must play basketball or something." So I asked him, I was like, "Who is that?" I'm like, "Oh shoot, that's it's Dr. J, invented the slam dunk." I was like, "Oh shoot." I've actually met a lot of different celebrities and then, founders and whatnot. And some of them actually turned into my really good customers. In my last business, the furniture store, that was an interesting one because I was working one day. I was with a customer. And then my coworker was like, "Hey, you know who that is?" And I was like, "No." So this guy sits down, really big, right? Like V-taper. Big smile, goes like, "Hey," and I was like, "Hey, what's up, man?" Like I'm friendly, right? So my coworker tasked me, was like, "Hey, do you know who that is?" I was like, "No." He's like, "It's Vernon Davis." I was like, "Oh, he's probably like football, right? I don't watch football."
Yeah.
So he was actually my first client in the Niners, right? And then after that, they just kind of all told each other about us, and then we actually ended up selling to over 60 players.
Wait, so is your family's furniture store still active today?
They closed down. My mom reopened another shop.
Okay.
But yeah, the original one that was really big is no longer here today. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I actually have a funny Vernon Davis story. I saw him at a Chipotle in Campbell, and I was refilling my my water cup, and he stood right next to me refilling his glass, and I like just froze for whatever reason. And like he was like his nonverbal was like, "Is this dude gonna say hi?
Yeah.
Or is he gonna just awkwardly stare at me?" And I'm like right next to him, filling my cup.
Yeah.
I'm like, and then he just was like, and then he walked away. I was like, "Damn it, why couldn't I say anything?"
Yeah. It's weird. I used to get that too, right? Like, just starstruck.
Yeah.
And then over time, after meeting a lot of people, I'm like, I kind of shifted my perspective. Like, these are actually just normal people, and when they're out, they actually want to probably just be treating like a normal person, right? But they get this all the time.
I mean, that's
and it probably helps out that actually a lot of times I don't know who they are.
Yeah.
And I just treat everyone the same, right? So
I know the sports I can recognize. Ask me about it, like what a singer looks like. I don't know.
Yeah.
Or actors. Okay, so you found an interesting passion play with steak. I mean, I love steak too.
Yeah.
Although I never once thought to start a steak company.
Yeah.
If someone wanted to do the same right now, like, are there any interesting niches or verticals that you think could still be ripe for, say, entry for someone else who's looking to start their own distribution company?
Yeah, I think it depends on like what industry you want to be in. If you want to be in Wagyu, the market's a little saturated right now.
Yeah.
So you really got to ask yourself like, what is my value proposition? How am I going to differentiate myself? I think people right now, I think escapism is going to be really big in the next few years.
You mean just
with all the craziness around the world, right? Like, what made Wagyu really popular in the pandemic? It's people are sitting at home, they want to do something, right?
They want to do
Steak
something
is fun.
special.
Special, yes.
Yeah.
So if you can curate an experience that is special, right? So, something to do is maybe you have a cooking class, right? Truffle Shuffle is really good at this, right? They have different chefs, they'll ship you the ingredients and whatnot. So yeah, I guess it depends on like which industry you want to be in.
Yeah.
The biggest cost to any business, as you know, is customer acquisition, right? And where I found success there is finding other businesses that already have that customer base and then doing collaborations with them, right? Specifically, if someone has a really big email marketing list, that's where I've kind of found success.
To get on their list, not necessarily grow your own list.
Yeah. Thank you. By getting onto their list, right, you kind of grow yours. So I've also found, it's basically finding these legacy businesses, right? So I also work for this company called Maruhide. They have 30 years of customer history, right? And they actually weren't doing any marketing, which I thought was kind of weird, right? They only did Instagram, right? So I started actually doing email marketing for them. I actually have zero experience with this too, right? So did it.
Yeah.
And then just that kind of just took their business off, right? And I was like, oh, this is interesting.
Like it took the business off on a like direct to consumer base or
direct
on a
to consumer,
B2B play?
B2C.
B2C play.
Yeah.
And just because they would never re-engage their customers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They would never re-engage them. So a lot of customers just forgot about them, but that was their gold mine, right? And I had a hunch, right? I was like, I wonder, most people just forgot about you. So we started targeting them again, and then I also did some. I basically rebranded them into a luxury brand. We talked about that subject earlier. So if you had to build something, product is just product, but can you make an actual brand out of them?
Yeah.
A company that does this really well is the Caviar Co. My friends over there. I think if you kind of take the perspective of you're like kind of a marketing company first, product second, that doesn't mean you don't have really good products, right? You can have the best products out there, but if nobody knows about you, there's no sales, then but that's where I've seen people that are kind of successful in the industry. Same thing with the furniture industry. There's a company called Ashley Furniture, $1 billion enterprise. That one piece of advice the rep used to tell me was like, hey, we're a marketing company first, furniture company second. And I thought it was kind of weird, right? But now I actually understand it, right?
And that's like the Gary Vee is like personal brand of that, where he says, he says media company, but marketing, same thing.
Yeah.
Is that like that brand element is so hard to build and constantly evolves too. Like it's like you have your pillars, but it has to shift obviously as consumer preferences shift too. And if it doesn't, then it makes it very, very tough.
Yeah, he's really good at, his whole thing is day trading attention.
Yeah.
But I like his way of thinking about businesses, right? Actually I got this idea, I think, where he, when he was at his dad's wine company, he would do research about some of his customers. And like, I think there's one story where some guy was really into football, right? Went to eBay, bought a signed jersey, sent it to them, and then got a ton of business off of that, right? I think one of my business secrets is just doing things for people and helping people and not expecting anything in return. So what I did for this customer was I actually just sent him a bunch of product, right? My love language is food. So if I like you, when we initially meet, I'll actually send you something. Actually, I did that for you too, right? I don't do it for everyone, right? But, I did that. And, it's for me, it's, I was trying to find who are the leaders within the Asian American community, right?
Yeah.
And then let me just ship them something as a way of thank you, right? So I did that. And that he ended up actually being one of my best customers, right? So one thing I also did is when he buys stuff from me, a lot of times is actually to ship a little bit of happiness, right? Someone may have like lost their job or going through something, right? So I will actually be like, hey, you know what? He'll reach out to me. Can we ship this, right? And I can pay for it. Sometimes actually be, you know what? Actually, I'll cover that, right? And
yeah, go a little above and beyond.
Above and beyond, right? Like I don't have to do that, but just I think it's a nice gesture, right?
Yeah.
And then I think that builds a lot of loyalty. From there, he's one of my biggest supporters right now, and I don't want to mention his name just for privacy things, but I think if you are super obsessed with customers and just deliver that experience, right, then they'll be kind of loyal to you, right? I think what was the thing that you mentioned before? It was like having
giftology.
I actually think though, like So I used to hire engineers at Facebook, right?
Yeah.
Some of the smartest people in the world. I think the best candidates are people that are generalists, people that kind of can do anything. And why that's important on a team, especially if you're small, is you can kind of step in. But the other thing too is like when you actually get to a point where you hire people or you build that team, you kind of know exactly like what they need to do. And I think in life there's a lot of people that are really good specialists, but it's really hard to find a good generalist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because I mean, school and education doesn't like teach you to be a generalist. You're only doing this one subject.
Yeah.
You majored in this one thing.
Yeah.
And for most people, like I know I'm trying to think about like scaling and all this stuff too.
Yeah.
Even on the real estate side is like you want to find that person who's really really good at that one thing, at fixing that one like specific thing in the house, and that's it.
Yeah.
But as the entrepreneurship side, like you have to be a generalist, I think, to bootstrap it.
Yeah.
But I think at a certain revenue point, that priority shifts.
Yeah. And I think that's where I'm at too, is to build that super team.
Yeah.
Of bringing the black belts, right? So they can just focus on what they're good at. So I was listening to a podcast. I think it might have been an interview with Steve Jobs.
Okay.
And they asked him, what's the best product you ever built? And a lot of people will be like, oh, it's like the iPod, it's the MacBook, whatever, right? But he actually says building the team that actually built those products is actually the best. Check this out. So you know what reverse searing is?
Yes, where you cook it first, and then, you sear it first and then you cook it. Right?
So reverse sear is the opposite of that. So the traditional way to cook a steak is you have high heat, right? You put it down, you sear it, and then you finish at a lower temperature. And what that creates is banding. I'm sure you know this already, but for people at home, and what banding is, like the edges are like overcooked, and then it's like medium rare in the middle, right? But what we did here is I started off as a really, really low temperature.
Okay.
Because I want to get that close to like almost a medium rare temperature, and then I'm going to sear this at the end, and it just creates more like uniform cooking. Granted, it's hard right now because we don't actually have like we don't have a smoker or whatever, but this is like the best we can do.
Yeah.
But it's actually one of the secrets to cooking a really good steak. You can do this through like sous vide or using a smoke or whatever. So you like a traditional way sous vide, right? The water is at like 135 degrees, whatever. Then you sear it at the end. In the smoker, right? You'd have like a meat thermometer, and then once it gets to temp, right, kind of dry it off and then sear it. So long story short is you can actually cook the best steak at home because you have time on your side. Restaurants don't have time, it's like you got to get that ticket out of there. So
it's true. And it takes a few steaks, I'm sure, to really master it. Like anything, you can't get on the first try. But I know, like for me, like once I figured out sous vide, I kind of don't do anything else. I'm like, all right, I figured it out. I don't know if I want to mess this thing up anymore. But I do love the taste of it with some fire on it.
Yeah.
It just tastes different.
So I think sous vide is also my favorite because it's set it and forget it. And then, you have kids too. So we have a million things to do. I literally just want to put it in there, forget about it. And then when it's time to serve, guests are late, like 2 or 3 hours late. It's all good, But yes, the taste of actual real charcoal, real fire, you can't really replace that. But you can also always sear over direct fire, right? Get a torch. Or if you have like a grill, there's so many ways to do it.
Okay, so going back to that giftology, getting connections, kind of, your 1,000 raving fans that we talked about on another call before. For every business, like influencer marketing or partnering with your black belts in the space is the most important for growth. And those black belts are always changing. Right? The influencer are always changing. Attention is changing. How did you get your first like celebrity chefs to start cooking with your products?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, empathy is a very powerful tool, right? So it allows me to kind of think about, okay, like this person that I'm sending something to, like what's everyone else doing, right? It's like, oh, I want you to like post this for me, right? But Gary Vee has a book called, I think it's Jab, Jab, Right Hook. And I kind of think about it the same way, right? So I'm like, I always give value. But when I send out these packages to like a celebrity chef or something, I'm literally like, hey, I would actually love to send you some steak. I'm a fan of you. There's no need to post it or anything. If you like it, great. If you want to post it, great. There's no obligation, right?
Yeah.
So then that allowed me actually to connect with some celebrity chefs. And then, yeah, it's pretty interesting, right? Because they might have deals where they get paid kind of a lot, and if you're not there, like, why would they do it? It's a lot of time, right? One of my biggest secrets is telling people what I'm about. So my goal in life is actually to do philanthropy and to help people, right? So that actually allows me to get access to a lot of people, because who doesn't love that goal, right?
Yeah.
But I think my first real big breakthrough was Chef Martin Yan.
Okay.
Where we started doing like events together. And then we have some plans to do things as well. But I actually met him at an event at JP Morgan. So they threw this event where he's doing his show, and there's a dinner at what is it, Chef Chu's, very iconic place. So I came as a guest.
Okay.
And actually didn't really know who he was. I kind of knew like maybe of him, but I was talking to, remember Dave Sands? I was like, hey, I got this event, Chef Martin Yan. I don't know if I want to go, right? I'm like default no to everything because I want to spend time with my kid. And he's like, dude, you better go, man. I was like, okay. So I went, and then I just remember looking around the room, like everyone was like starstruck with him, right? Like people are coming up and they're like shaking and super nervous. Like, wow, this guy has an interesting like reach on people, right? And I was actually kind of nervous to talk to him as well. But then I went there, and then my friend Rosalina actually introduced us, and she was like, oh, Sean has a Wagyu beef business. You should do things with him. And she's really good friends with the owner of the restaurant. So I think that caught his attention, right?
Yeah. And also because someone else introduced you like that versus you being like, hey, I'm Sean. I have a Wagyu company. You want to do business?
Yeah.
It comes off a little more distasteful versus someone making that friendly intro of like, hey, I think there could be a mutual connect, which goes a long way in referral points.
Yeah. So when I actually meet people, I typically don't tell them what I do unless they ask about it. And it's because I think in life, if you're of status or you have a certain amount of success, right, people want something from you. Mm-hmm. And I think that's been my secret is I actually don't want anything from you. Like, if we can figure out like what our goals are and we're aligned, great, but yeah, I think that's kind of a secret to networking, right? Because people are like, damn, how do you meet all these people, Sean? I'm like, I just put myself out there in terms of like, I'll tell you what I'm about, but I'm not like, hey, like, oh, I got a Wagyu beef business, and you should buy from me, right? It's actually quite the opposite. But I think that perspective actually, maybe human beings want things that they can't have, or I don't know what it is. Actually, a lot of different things actually end up coming back this way. Yeah, it's I think one of the other secrets too is just having like people bring your name up when there's opportunity.
Yeah.
That's actually been like a lot of opportunities come up too, right? Is people just bring up my name, and then I do the same for other people, right? I try to help them. So, cheers, man.
Cheers. Ooh, I'm guessing we're in the resting phase now.
Resting, I think we got to sear this a little bit more. How do you like your steaks?
Maybe medium rare is fine, but as chef recommends is how I like my steak today.
Yeah. Picanha actually, because there's so much fat inside of it, I actually want that rendered down a little bit more. So most people eat steak USDA prime or below. Okay. If you cook it beyond medium rare, you get moisture loss, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, and for those at home, it's like you have a towel, right? And then you're squeezing all the moisture out of that towel. But with Wagyu, the more marbled it is, if you cook it past like medium rare to like medium or medium well, you actually render all that fat down. So there's actually no right or wrong way. I prefer to render that fat down a little bit more.
Huh. Interesting. That is also a little baller statement that you could make. Be like, when it's USDA prime or below, you don't cook it as much. But when you eat the real good stuff, You have a lot more flexibility. It's what you said.
Yeah, it's I think there's no like ideal steak, but it's basically whatever you like, right?
Yeah.
So I have some clients who are like, I don't like Japanese Wagyu. I want something like kind of like prime, maybe a little bit more, right? And then opposite ends of the spectrum. But yes, I do eat non-Wagyu steaks. I do also have high cholesterol, so if I do eat meat, I try to eat the good stuff.
Yeah.
But prime, I do love because there's texture. After you eat like a lot of Wagyu, sometimes you got to take a break from it.
I know, I get it. I mean, it's like working in the alcohol industry.
Yeah. So, how did you actually get started in marketing?
For me, it was the entrepreneurship side too.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've in college, I managed a martial arts school.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Ernie Reyes, West Coast, on one of the ones in Milpitas. They managed that, and so like business ops inside, I learned like the bootstrapping entrepreneurship in college, managing that school.
Yeah.
200 something students at $200 a month. You got to figure it out. And
wow.
Being 18, figure out how to sell
18.
that thing. Dang. So like that was like the first website I ever made. Just like I think this looks nice, and compared to what they had, it was better. So it worked. Went to grad school at University of Hawaii. Started a CrossFit clothing brand and a CrossFit gym while I was in grad school.
Wow. And
then I started marketing T-shirts.
Oh.
And so I had to learn Facebook ads, YouTube University.
Yeah.
Like not spending a lot, just figuring out what works on social media. I actually did a lot of giveaways too with the CrossFit clothing brand. So I'd have all these favorite CrossFit athletes, and I'm like, hey, I'm the only brand in Hawaii, so let me send you a care package with some Kona coffee, some Mac nuts, and some at that time Shakas and Snatches t-shirts, and you could post better or not, no worries.
Yeah.
And then that scaled into when I left that a few years later, got into ad sales, sold a lot of digital marketing, a lot of like Facebook ad packages, ended up starting to produce some of that creative too. Opened up the position at the winery.
Yeah.
Got that. And then that was like this position was actually like my first real like actual marketing manager position. Before that, it's never been an actual job title.
Yeah.
That's been now 4 years. This podcast that I started.
Yeah.
It's been 3 years in the making.
What's your podcast about for those people at home?
Yeah, I mean, it's called Cash Flow Happy Hour. So obviously, if you got to this point, like we're already all best friends. Yeah. So if you're not subscribed, you're not following along, please hit that. It'd mean the world to me. Maybe we can find a way to get you some steak. But it's just about how other people are making money, improving their cash flow, whether it be through, initially started through rental properties, but as interests change and like just the scope of guests, I mean, I think everyone has an interesting way of making money, of making an ends meet for their family. Mm-hmm. I eventually want to get into like what you think about different investing too towards the end of the show.
Yeah.
But that's really all it is.
I think you're in a unique position because food and wine brings everyone together, right?
Yeah.
So I'd imagine you actually meet a lot of people through this industry if you host a lot, right? So I think it's going to open a lot of doors, and who knows in 5-10 years what we'll be doing, right? So just to circle back, you train martial arts, right? I think that's one of the things I actually connected with you about. What do you train?
I mean, I grew up doing Ernie Reyes West Coast World Martial Arts. It was the generic, let's call it American Taekwondo / karate / a hodgepodge of world martial arts. I was always okay at it. I was never like spectacular at it.
Yeah.
And then in college, I kind of wanted to prove myself because, and then I started to learn like, oh, there's like in Korea, there's Kukiwon black belts. And like, I don't actually have like a Kukiwon black belt. It's the West Coast black belt. And so then I went on this like whole like vendetta, like trying to prove myself as I was like teaching martial arts, managing the martial arts school of, all right, well, do I know my stuff?
Yeah.
Was never good at the traditional stuff, but like I always had decent grit.
Uh-huh.
And so I was like, cool, let me just like, and my conditioning was decent. I played basketball in high school. And so I said, all right, let me like take my stab at going to kickboxing tournaments, like open smokers. So I started training at AKA.
Oh.
Did jiu-jitsu at Heroes. Would do some of the smoker tournaments over at AKA. Mainly all the stand-up stuff.
Yeah.
With it being a kicking background, kind of had fun. My early days, my favorite moment was Kung Lee was coaching the guy that I was fighting against in the corner.
Oh.
And I landed some decent kicks in this tournament, and like Kung Lee was like, "Watch out for his kicks, watch out!" And I was like, "Kung Lee's saying that his kicks are amazing." Yes.
Oh man, Kung is amazing. Yeah, he was actually like a childhood hero of mine growing up, and then he actually posted some stuff for me too. But yeah, what a beast, dude! His kicks are pretty amazing. So the reason I asked you this is, I think that for entrepreneurs, the most important thing, or one of the most important things you can have, is grit, in my opinion.
Okay.
Because, if you've been down this journey, right, and just having so many entrepreneur friends, it's going to be a crazy journey. If you don't have that grit, right, you might just burn out. So I think it's like, well, okay, how do I get grit? Sometimes, like, maybe you're born with it. Sometimes you go through like a lot of adversity, right? You might be like an immigrant. Like my sister's an immigrant. A lot of grit, right?
Yeah.
Super hungry. But and actually a good way, in my opinion, of how to learn grit is actually by training martial arts, specifically jiu-jitsu too. Muay Thai, kickboxing, same thing, right? And it's interesting that Mark Zuckerberg started training jiu-jitsu, which I thought was interesting, right?
There's a lot of I don't even know. There's a lot of real estate folks too are also in jiu-jitsu.
Oh, really? I did not know that.
So it's I think martial arts, hands down, is one of the best ways to do it. If you're adverse to physical contact, which I totally get it too, I think finding any type of like athletic sport, whether it be like long distance running, CrossFit, anything that requires you, I would say, to kind of go into the dark place, especially if you get somewhat competitive. Like there's going to be a point in that race, in that run, where you're like, I should stop.
Yeah.
And that's when you're like, no, I got another 30 more minutes. I got another hour to push through it. I can do that one more round.
Yeah, I think that's really important, right? It's like that little voice in your head when you think you should quit, right? And it's like, I'm so tired. I don't think I have it anymore. And it's like, if you can push through that, you actually be really surprised of what you're capable of.
What's been a time in your entrepreneurship journey? Obviously, as you transition through different businesses, that is a time where, like, literally, well, this didn't work out, so you're tapping out on that business. But in terms of Papa Wagyu, like, was there a dark time moment where you're like, I don't know, I guess we should just stay the course?
When I think about like my parents, right, and what they went through is they worked crazy hours, and I had a really good life growing up. But the trade-off is your family, right?
Yeah.
So you look at all your friends they have 9-to-5 jobs, Monday through Friday, 40 hours a week. They get paid really well. You're like, damn, what did I do? I'm working crazy hours, right? In the beginning, it's like, for most businesses, like, first 1 to 2 years, you're really not making anything, right? So there's definitely a lot of those conversations in my head, right? But I think that's where having kind of that grit, right? Or maybe you pivot to something else, right? I think you just got to sit down and do like a deep dive into your soul and like, okay, well, what is my goal, right? And then if you want to do entrepreneurship, what is the price that I'm willing to pay? Like weekends, holidays, friends, family, yeah, like, and if you think you can do it, then cool, and my message is like, why not, right?
Yeah.
I think the biggest regret is like if you're on your deathbed one day and you're like, I should have did this, right? Versus like, I did it and I failed, but the failure is actually like learning lessons, right? It's like in martial arts, right? Yeah, that's a good question.
All right, let's see what some of the last questions we got here, and then it looks like we're ready to dig in soon. Okay, so I want to know, has there been one specific relationship, meeting, dinner, that was like a next level unlock for you? Is it someone that you met?
Yes. I don't want to disclose the name, but there is one. There's actually there's a couple people, right? There's people of influence that I consider my mentors.
But give me that one that came first.
The one that came first, I can't tell you his name, but I'll tell you that he is very, very successful, and just actually being connected to him I've kind of learned a lot, and that actually opened up a lot of doors because I'm like, oh, when I meet people, they're like, oh shit, we actually have like a lot of like friends in common or whatever. Especially if you go into like that kind of niche community where a lot of the leaders are, but just being like, oh yeah, he's actually my client, and or actually I'm good friends with him. That is like, oh wow, like, because a lot of people will try to get close to this person, right? But that has definitely opened a lot of doors. And then now I'm kind of at a point where when I actually do meet people, I have like this Rolodex of people that I'm connected to, right? That are willing to kind of just vouch for me, and that leads to a lot of interesting things.
Dude.
Yeah.
I mean, it's always more about, I feel like what you know is important, but who you know is slightly more important, but you still got to know stuff.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So I think my whole thing is like, if you ask me like what I'm really good at, like I consider myself like a Swiss Army knife for a lot of entrepreneurs, can figure out a lot of things, but what I'm really, really good at is connecting people. And what I've been trying to do is like kind of build this community of black belts in different industries. And like what is our shared mission is actually like helping people. So when I have like friends that are like, oh, I'm trying to solve this problem, or I'm trying to do this, I'm like, oh, you should go talk to this person, right? And then I'll set that up, and then they'll be like, wow, Sean, that's amazing, right? That's exactly who I needed to talk to. And actually it didn't cost you anything. That's the main thing, right? They're not trying to like steal your ideas or make money from you, right? But having access, I think that's great. So another point, there's a guy called, his name is Ray Dalio. And you know who Ray Dalio is? Okay. So you probably know this already. I was listening to a podcast with him, and he said, what do you want to continue when you're no longer here on this earth? Because the human experience is like 100 years, if you're lucky. It's a very short amount of time, right? So what I've been trying to create is like this community of people that just love helping people and just to leave the world a better place. And with all the crazy stuff going on nowadays, right? It's like, it's easy to be cynical, right? You like your phone's all this crazy stuff's happening, right? But then I actually want to change that. But like, actually, no, like look at my friends in my community. It's actually all amazing people. So the reason I actually started doing this was actually for my son. I don't know if this is gonna be off topic or not, but something I'm really, really passionate about. So when I was growing up, I didn't have very many role models that looked like me. Did you?
No.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, well, I don't want that for my son, right? I want him to be comfortable in his own skin. So I think there's a big movement right now, right, for Asian Americans to be kind of out there. But I was like, okay, I want my son to actually have access to these, black belts or whatever. They could be successful in whatever fields, but they all kind of share a mission to help people, right? And I want him to to grow up around that, and I want him to understand like that's a level that you're playing at, right? Because when I think about like what is my purpose here on Earth, it's to help people, right? But 100 years is not very long, right? So when I became a father, I was like, that gave me actually a lot of hope, man. Where I can kind of teach him how to be an amazing human being to others, right? And then hopefully that creates a movement. But yeah, that was very philosophical. You ready to eat?
Yeah,
drop that bomb on you.
No, dude, I think the same way. Like, as soon as you have a kid, like the perspective, it just like shifts. And you also like don't know how much your parents loved you until you have a kid. Like you think you know, but you actually don't know until. So.
Yeah, what I remember is even though my parents were working crazy hours, like they came home, cooked us a meal, and never said I was tired, right? And of course they were, right? But yeah, that sacrifice, you never understand until you become a parent. So, cheers to that, man.
Cheers. Oh, look, you only got one last sip. You better hit that subscribe button and like this video, and then share this with anyone who also loves steak. Sean, I'll give you my mic and I'll hold it. How can people find you?
So I'm on Instagram, very responsive there. It's at Papa Wagyu, which is Wagyu. You can also shop online at papawagyu.com. And And then, yeah, I think the last message is like, if anyone needs help out there with whatever, I'm an open book. So DM me. I'm happy to help.
Dude, I love it. And I appreciate you jumping on the show, sharing your business story with the audience and with me. Super inspiring. Obviously, a delicious product. Yeah. By the way, we have now had a couple business meetings with and without steak. And my personal favorite now that you've convinced me is the Australian ribeye. So when I got the A5 from my sister, it was super, super rich and I couldn't eat the whole thing. But that Australian Wagyu was like just enough beefiness with a nice fat that was delicious. So,
yeah, I think in life, it's all about balance, right? So that's one of my personal favorites. For those at home, actually, how can we support you? My followers may not know who you are.
Yeah, I mean, for me, just the easiest way to follow along is to, of course, subscribe to wherever you're watching this. Could be on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Spotify. I don't even know. There's too many things. TikTok. But honestly, I just like sharing the message of other entrepreneurs, specifically, too, with our own investing journey as well. So if you're interested in that and you want to come out and learn a little bit more, maybe even invest in one of our deals in the future, you can come out to our meetups if you're in the Bay Area. If not, follow along, and we do stuff all nationwide. So see you there.
Thanks for having me on, man. What a pleasure.
You want man. Yes, please. Oh.
It tastes better off the cutting board.
Dude. This is a good lunch meeting. We have good lunch meetings.
Last time, we had was that J-Lord, right? Yeah. We had Trifecta. Shout out to him. Chef Ryan and Dave Sands came out to cook, and this is the only type of meetings I like to have, by the way.
And you know what's crazy is the fat has rendered like that was a really big fat cap.
Yeah.
And seeing it now, yeah, gosh. All right, guys. Well, I'm gonna get to eating. We'll see you guys all on the next episode.